G'day guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to talk about a solution I came up to prolong one of our most precious resources when we're off camping and caravanning, and that is being water. So today we're going to talk about what I've done here to extend our stays when we're free camping, how to go about building one of these for yourself, and all the statistics and facts you need to know about it in terms of power usage and its time to fill. So let's get straight into today's video. Okay, so there's no doubt about it, the most limiting factor for us when we're off-grid caravanning or camping is water. We seem to go through it quite quickly, and also it's one of those things that you don't want to carry too much in your setup because obviously it weighs it down and they're bulky items to carry. Now what we've also found in our few years of caravanning and camping as well is you often park and camp next to bodies of water, whether or not that be dams, creeks, rivers, streams, whatever it is, there's often a fresh water source not too far away. So what I've come up with today is a solution to get that fresh water source, filter it, and then put it into our caravans or into jerry cans, and to extend that time we can stay in an off-grid location. So this box here is self-sufficient in terms of its power. It can run off the vehicle, and all the filters that we've got here I'll go into in a bit of detail. But first of all, let's go through all the tools and what parts and how I went about building it, and then we'll come back and we'll do all the testing for it. Okay, so these are some of the basic tools that you're going to need to use to put this box together if you want to build one for yourself. So it's going to need some basic hand tools, things like wire cutters, long nose pliers. I've got some wire strippers as well, but they're not necessary if you just can use the cutters there. I've also got some solder and a little butane torch. I don't actually use a soldering iron, I just use a torch to heat the wire up, and then some solder there. I've got some screwdrivers, a hole saw here for cutting a hole inside the box for the outlet hoses. Got some drill bits and a drill obviously. And a very sharp Stanley blade. So if you use a really sharp one, you can actually use that to cut some of the holes in the plastic that you need, and does a fairly good job there. I've also got some super glue, which will be used to attach some of these small brackets that we're going to be using to hold over the electrical wiring and the conduit that we've got here. And then I've got some thread tape for all the plumbing fixtures as well. Just got some assorted heat shrink here and some wiring bits and pieces that I might use as well. So overall, you don't need a whole lot of stuff, just some basic tools there, and let's get straight into it. Okay guys, so here we are in the shed, and these are all the things that you might want to think about getting if you want to build one of these boxes for yourself. So let's go through each of the items, and I'll tell you why I chose them and how everything here works. So I'll start with the most obvious, which is the box itself. Okay, so this particular box here I bought from Bunnings. It's a Tactics box. Now, when I was looking at buying boxes, I was looking for something as small as possible that would fit all this gear in there, but would still fit the pump fairly well and fit away quite comfortably in the van. So this box here may look quite big, and look, it probably is a little bit taller than it needs to be. However, it does fit all the extra hoses that you're going to need to put in there to connect to your water filter and your suction hose and things like that. So it does keep everything you need inside the one box. The other advantage about this particular box as well is the top flaps up here do open up, and I've chosen to mount my Anderson plugs and my switches inside those flaps, which means they're not accidentally going to get knocked when the box is packed away. So moving on from the box there, I have chosen to run a twin water filter here. So this is a twin carbon and 0.5 micron water filter. Now look, it might reduce the flow of the pump a little bit, however, that's something I'm willing to compromise with to make sure I get some good quality water going into either jerry cans or the caravan tank, whichever way I choose to go. So these are replaceable, and it's fairly simple. Obviously it's quite a large unit, but you simply plug one side in and the water comes out the other side. So it's super easy, it connects onto the normal fittings that you already have in the caravan, and that's going to filter our water really, really well. Now an alternative for this is just a regular carbon inline water filter, if you want to do that as well. I just chose to go for this. I'm testing this out for the first time, and we'll see how it goes with the water pump. So all the plumbing inside the box itself is going to be using this sort of 16mm, it's called the Smartex P line of plumbing pipe. So it's a plastic pipe. It's fairly rigid. It does have a little bit of flex in it, but not a whole lot. The reason I went for this sort of stuff is because of the availability of the connectors it has with it. So there's a whole lot of connectors that go with it, and it's simply a push in and lock in system. So they don't leak, they're really reliable, and they're super tough when they're all put together. So that brings me onto some of the fittings that we're going to be using today. So we've got a bunch here, and I've kept all the packets and all the details so I can put all the detailed item descriptions in the description of this video, so you can go and buy all this stuff for yourself if you want. But what we have got in the end here is a couple of male fittings which are going to come out the side of the box, which is going to be inlet and outlet hoses for the water. And then we've just got a couple of elbows and a couple of adapter pieces that are going to go around the pump, and you'll see that when we put the pump together, just to make it all work. Now obviously we've got our normal garden hoses. We have a couple of male fittings. Now I've chosen to go for male fittings on the outside of the box just because they are physically smaller than the female fittings, which means the box, and these are going to be less vulnerable for damage and being knocked around on the outside of the box, and it's going to keep the box as small as possible. Now I've got a couple of pipes here. So this is just a normal sort of garden hose type pipe. It's made by a company called Nilex. This is their anti-kink line, they call it. So there's a couple of reasons I went for that. First of all, it actually ended up being just as cheap as your normal garden hose stuff because it came with the fittings already included on it. And the second reason is that you want the suction side to have a little bit more strength. As the pump pulls the water through the suction hose, you don't want the hose collapsing on itself and then starving the pump of water. So the other pipe hose here, they're both 2 meter lengths, has just got a normal fitting on one end, and I've taken the fitting off the other end. And that's where we're going to fit our strainer. So it's just a 12mm barb strainer, and it is also a screw type fitting, so it's nice and easy to clean out if that's the case. And that will just simply fit onto the end of that hose with a hose clamp there. Now going along with the water pump itself, so I have chosen to go for a Sherflow. So this is the 4009, and there's a couple of reasons I chose to go for this particular water pump. First of all, it's 11.3 litres per minute, so it's got a fairly decent flow rate, nothing that's going to blow you away, but it's going to be adequate enough for what I'm going to use it for. Now, probably the main reason I bought this is it's because it's identical to the pump that I run in the van, which now means that if anything goes wrong with the pump in the van while I'm on a trip and I'm carrying this box, I can simply replace it with this pump, and it's not going to hold me up when I'm out and about. So having a backup pump is a great idea. Yes, I could have gone with something that's much bigger, but do I really need it? No. The other thing about this one here is you're only using, well, less than 7 amps. It recommends a 7 amp fuse, so it's not going to draw a huge amount of power. Obviously, the bigger the pump, the heavier, the larger in size, and the more power they're going to draw. So that pump there is going to be perfect for what we need, and it's a good option there for replacing the van pump if anything were to go wrong with that. Now, in terms of electronics, it's going to be a basic system. Being only a low draw system, there's not going to be a whole lot involved. Now I'm going to be using an Anderson plug off the back of the car to power this box, and that line is already fused, and that's going to go through into an Anderson plug on top of the box, through into another fuse, which will be a 7.5 amp fuse inside the box, and then wired up to a switch that will stick inside the box as well. Now that switch is already rated to 20 amps, so we're not going to need to stick a relay or anything like that in there, and that's just going to be a simple open and closed circuit that will control the pump. Now, in addition to that, I've also got here a pre-cut set of 5 meter Anderson plug wire. So it's just heavy duty wire. Obviously it's rated for 50 amp, not that we're going to need that, but this will mean that I can just plug this to the back of the car, move the box away from the car, and then plug it into the box. So the car won't have to be right up along what side the water's edge. The great thing about this is I did get this online just off eBay, and you can buy as much or as little of it as you want. I only chose to go 5 meters to start with. I'll see how we go. If I need another 5, I can just simply add it into the Anderson plug. That brings me to the point you will need another Anderson plug, so you just got to buy one separately. Again, just bought that online, and that will be the one that you fit into the box itself for this cabling to connect to. In addition to that, you'll just need some little bolts, screws and bits and pieces as well that will hold down the Anderson plug switches and the wiring and whatnot. So as we go through, I'll set up some time lapses as I start to build the box, and we'll talk about it as we go. And then obviously once we're finished, we'll go over how I've set up all up and how it all works, and we'll see how it works. So let's go. So the first thing I decided to start with was the wiring. So I've cut a small hole in the center compartment of the top of the box, and that's where I've mounted the rocker switch. I've then mounted the Anderson plug to the top compartment, and you can see there the 2 bolts holding that down, and then wiring the positive and negative to the switches, and a positive and negative coming out of the switch down to the box itself. The little box in the center compartment there is just the 7.5 amp inline fuse we're using in this instance, and then I've covered it all with a corrugated split tubing just to make sure it's nice and neat and nice and protected from any abrasions or water. We then move on to building the pump itself. So it's just a matter of using a couple of elbows and a couple of adapters to fit in the inline filter there. Now that filter strainer has to be used on the inlet side of the pump just in order to keep the warranty. So that will filter out any pieces before it goes into the pump. Anything that does go through there, the pump should be able to handle. As you can see here as well, I'm using thread tape on all the connections there just to make sure there's going to be no leaks. You then move on to the side of the box and just got to drill those couple of holes into the side of the box where the exterior hoses will connect. So I've just done that line of sight, nothing too fancy there, and cut a couple of holes into the side of the box. I then used a drill just to widen it out as I didn't have a file that was suitable. Once they were the correct size, just clean them up with a Stanley knife and have them fitted, then screwing the male fittings on to the exterior. Moving inside the box, it's just a matter of determining where the pump needs to go. Now I need both those elbows facing towards those two outlets we've just put into the side of the box. The pump is mounted to rubber mounts, so it was just easier to do one at a time to make sure the mounts didn't move around as I was drilling them into the box. So once the pump was mounted, it was just a matter of figuring out how long I needed these cables that I had set up earlier. And again, corrugated split tubing was used over the wires just to protect it, and the pump was wired in. All the electrical connections in this instance were used using crimps and then covered with heat shrink. So it's going to make a waterproof connection and also a very strong connection as well. Now for the plumbing, it was just a matter of measuring the distances between the outlets on the exterior of the box there and the outlets on the pump and cutting them to shape. Now, even though this plumbing is quite hard, you can use heat there just to make it a little bit easier to bend and mold to shape. It's not the easiest thing to mold, but with a bit of heat and a bit of persuasion, it will mold to a slight bend there for you. Now in this instance, I've cut that top hose there a little bit too long. It's just a matter of taking a couple of mil off the end there and putting it back in. So these hoses push into the fittings about 22 mil, and that's a permanent fitting once it's in. They can come out with a special tool, but once they're in, they're pretty difficult to come out. It's very important to get those lengths of hoses correct, as you want to make sure that they push in correctly but don't push against the box and the mounts of the pump itself. So you can see there the hoses are splitting apart just a little bit towards the end of the box. Tried to bend it there a little bit more with some heat, but in the end I ended up using a cable tie. So originally I was going to super glue some little black clips to hold the corrugated tubing down to the top of the box. However, I decided against that just due to the lack of surface tension on the polished plastics on both surfaces. It just wasn't holding too well. So a drilled hole in the top compartment there for both of those clips there worked perfectly. It ended up being underneath the handle so you can't see it from the top, and it didn't affect the function of the handle at all. For the right hand side there, I just used a couple more of those clips, and that was just drilled into that right hand side compartment, so again you can't see it from the exterior of the box, and it doesn't affect the function of that little storage box either.
Okay guys, so there you go, you saw how I put that box together, and here is the final product here. So this box here comes in a weight of 6 kilos, or just about there, and in terms of dimensions, you've got 507 mil across, 259 by 254, so it's almost square in terms of its depth and height. The only thing on the external part of the box are these two water filler points here, and they come out 4 centimeters from the edge of the box. Otherwise, it's just a stock standard Tactics box you'd get from Bunnings in terms of its dimensions. Now I chose this particular box because it fits everything I need, including the suction hose, the outlet hose, the wiring, the pump itself, and all the switches and other electrical gear in the top of it, and it fits really nicely and keeps everything in one central location. So in the top of this box here on the left hand side, I have the power input. So I've got an Anderson plug mounted in there, and that simply connects to a 12-volt source, whether it be from the Caravan or from the car, and then the box then has power. In the center compartment here, I have the 12-volt switch, and that is just a simple toggle switch back and forth. And in the right hand side, I've just cleared an area there for some accessories. So all I've got in here is an Anderson plug to cigarette converter. So if I do want to plug off just a cigarette plug, I can do that as well. Opening the box up, we obviously have all that wiring that we've just fitted, but we keep our 10-meter Anderson plug lead, and this connects to the back of the vehicle or to a cigarette plug if you use that converter. We then got that 2-meter hose, and then the other 2-meter hose with the strainer on the end as well for that fresh water source. Now I have just put a cloth in there, and that's just to absorb any moisture, humidity or any water leakage from those pipes while the pump's not in use. And then obviously we've got the pump in there itself, which is firmly mounted to the base. Now using shallow bolts on the bottom, it means that those bolts are no longer, they're not on the base, they're not going to rub against the carpet or the surface you put them on. The feet of the box are still going to be the lowest part on this particular setup. You'll notice there's a strainer as well, and that's on the input line. So the strainer is required to be before the pump, and that ensures the warranty on the pump is still good to go. Anything that passes through there is acceptable to go through the pump itself. So the other thing that I have here is a couple of filters. So this particular inline filter I've got here just connects to your normal garden hose fittings, and this is the filter I normally use on our Caravan to fill up the water tanks. So this is just a 1 micron carbon filter. It's just an inline simple filter. It can be reverse flush through as well. We're going to test that out today in terms of its speed with the water coming from this pump. We've also got here a twin canister pump as well. Now this one's a little bit more involved. There are 2 sediment filters in here. So you've got one which is a carbon filter, similar to that of the inline, and one which is a 0.5 micron, which will start to get rid of some of the bacteria and the harmful stuff in the water that you're sourcing. So this one here is definitely going to be a little bit safer for drinking water if that's what you're seeking. And again, you've just got your normal garden hose fittings. Now the only negative with this one is it does fill up with a bit of water, and when it's full of water it is a total weight of about 6 kilos as well. So this alone, when it is full, is going to be equal to the weight of the box there. The other thing as well, these don't really like being stored, as the water just keeps dribbling out of these, so you've got to find some way to try and block that water from coming out when you're moving around. So one thing I mentioned as well, guys, is I'm going to put a detailed description in this video in relation to all the components I use to build this box, including the water filters and the hoses as well. So I found that most of the electronic components, the pump itself, and a few bits and pieces were bought off eBay just because they were nice and cheap. And the rest, such as your water fittings, like your brass fittings, the pipes themselves, the hoses and the box, were all bought from Bunnings, and again, it's just because it's the lowest price I could find. So again, all those products are going to be linked down below. So if you want to build one of these for yourself, you should just be able to purchase one of each below, and you should be able to build one of these boxes for yourself. So we're going to go down to a little stream that I've parked next to today, and we're going to test out how well this pump system works. We've got a little 10-litre jerry can here, and we're going to do a couple of tests in terms of how quick it fills using no filter, the inline filter and the twin canister, see whether that puts any additional load onto the pump and slows it down at all. We're also going to have a look at the power usage and just have a look at the general operation, how it works. So let's set up down there and let's get straight to it. So when building this box, I want it to be convenient and simple as possible. Although the box is a little bit large, at least it fits everything inside. So we're going to unpack it now and get it set up ready for use. The first thing we're going to do is get out that power cable and the 2 hoses that are inside. Chuck them aside for now, get rid of the cloth that we've got in there, and we're going to plug the box in to start with. So what I'm going to do in this particular instance, I'm going to use the Anderson cigarette plug adapter, and I'm going to run off the back of the drawer system. So let's get that chucked in. Okay, so coming back down to the box, we'll plug the box in, opening up that left flap, grabbing the other end of that Anderson cable there, and then just plugging that straight in. Now you know you've got power there because there is a blue light on the switch that lights up when there's power connected. So the second thing we're going to do is get our inlet and outlet hoses ready. So obviously the inlet hose is going to be the one with the strainer on it. Now you're going to want to try and make sure that strainer is sort of sitting midway in the water. You don't want it in the bottom picking up all the dirt, and you don't want it at the top picking up any air. So that'll be the trick to it, is just getting that sorted. So there's a little pocket of the water here which I'm going to stick it in, and we are in a fresh flowing stream here, so it's going to be reasonably fresh water here. Going to grab the other side hose as well, which is just another 2-meter hose, and plug that into the outlet side of the box. And there you go, essentially you're ready to go. Now keep in mind it's going to take a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds just for that water to come through as the pump primes. And if we hit that switch now, we've now got water coming out of the pump. You see there, it's a fairly decent stream, a bit of pressure to it. We're going to be pretty happy with that. So while we're here, we're going to set up a couple of tests and time how long it takes to fill up 10 litres with this particular pump. So the pump itself is rated to 11.2 litres per minute, so we'll give that a test with this particular setup. There we go. So it's about 10 litres there, and it took 1 minute and 10 seconds to fill up. So look, not too far off, whether or not it's the hoses or the voltage of the car or the strainer that slows it down a little bit. But overall, about 10 litres in just over a minute. Pretty impressed with that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to set up the inline filter, just the plain Caravan one I normally use, and see if that affects the flow at all. Okay, so here we are for the second test. This is the inline filter. This particular filter quotes that it can do up to 20 litres per minute. But keep in mind, the more resistance we put in this line, the slower it's going to be. So it's just a matter of simply plugging that in. And you are going to have to get an additional hose if you want to direct the water. So I have this one that I normally keep in my Caravan, which we're free camping with at the moment. We'll chuck that down there. We'll let it prime like we did the other setup. Okay, we'll stick it in this empty jerry can. So we'll stick it in that empty jerry can there. Get that timer ready. And we'll see how long this takes. Okay, so we stopped there, roughly the same point on the jerry can, so roughly 10 litres, and it is 1 minute and 22 seconds. So adding 12 seconds there for the inline filter, so that's not too bad at all. So that's set up for the third test, which is using that twin canister test, the twin canister filters. Okay, back to our third and final test now is the twin canister. So keep in mind, this is a carbon filter and a 0.5 micron. The advantage of using something like this is not only is it going to ensure there is no sediment and bits and pieces inside your water, but it's also going to start to eliminate some of the bacteria in that 0.5 micron. Now again, the more resistance you add, the slower it's going to take, so I'm expecting this one to be a little bit slower. So let's plug this up, bring back our 10 litre jerry can, and give it a test. Now again, just going to prime this before we start to make the test fair. This will take significantly longer to prime, and it's got to fill up those canisters with water first. Now noticing as well, I actually heard a change in the sound there of the pump. It does sound like it's working a little bit harder, trying to push through that finer filter. So got the pump all primed up there, get the stopwatch ready, and we'll get this jerry can filled up. So there you go, twin canister filtered water, 10 litres there in 1 minute and 34 seconds. So that is really not much that different to the inline filter, and about 24 seconds different to no filter at all. And I'd be pretty confident there to drink that water straight up as it is. So look, whether or not it's filling up your Caravan or filling up some supplies for your camping setup, this little pump's going to do the job really, really well. Tastes alright to me. If there's no more videos after this one, you know why. So one thing I should also mention with this box as well, as you probably noticed while we did all those tests, which we've just finished doing, is the box was closed. These water pumps don't require a lot of ventilation. They don't get overly hot in use. So this one here has been running now for those 3 minutes solid doing those 3 tests, and it is not hot to touch at all. It's barely even warm. So that's why there I'm confident in keeping that box closed. There's no water inside, no leaks. We're all looking really good on the outside here as well. So there you go, guys, you've seen how effective this pump is. Now the good thing about us Caravan is that we usually carry a little bit more gear, and we carry plenty of hoses, because when we are camping at Caravan sites, you're going to need a couple of hoses to plug into mains water. So the advantage of that is if you do choose to free camp and you're down near a river, provided you can get the power to this box, whether it be by a portable power pack or bringing your car down, there's nothing stopping you putting 10 or 20 meters of hose on the end of this pump and putting it straight into your tanks. So to fill up both the tanks on our Jayco journey, which are 90 litres each, you're looking at just over 20 minutes, and you're going to have 2 full tanks of relatively fresh water that I'd personally be happy to drink out of. So that's probably the biggest advantage to having a pump box like this, and the reason that I built one for our purposes. Okay guys, so the last thing I want to test here is just the amount of power this pump draws and whether or not it's viable to use while the car's not running or you're not getting any input. So at the moment, the Cruiser's sitting at 99% battery capacity and the secondary battery there is at 12.69 volts. We're just going to be running it off the standard cigarette lighter. There's no voltage step-up converters or anything, so the plug that I'll be attaching it to. So we're looking at the current draw here, and at the moment we're drawing at 0.46 of an amp, and that's just some things I've got going in the car at the UHF because we are on a trip at the moment. I'll make sure that the fridge is off in this test as well, so it won't come on at any point during the test. Now the pump's down by the water behind the camera and it's already switched on, so as soon as I plug this cigarette plug into the drawers, it's going to start up and we'll be able to see how many amps it draws. So there we go there, we'll give it a couple of seconds just to go through its cycle, but straight up there we're drawing 3.17 amps, and the water's going in the background there. So take away that 0.5 of an amp and you're looking at just over 2.5 amp. So look, the pump's been going there for a little while now and the amp draw is still at 3.15. Again, take away that 0.5 for the current background stuff running on the car, you're looking at just over 2.5 amp. Which is hardly any at all. It's going to take about just over 20 minutes to fill up both the 90 litre tanks on my Jayco journey out back to 108 litres in total. So just over 20 minutes, you'd be lucky to draw maybe just over 1 amp in that hour with the pump running like it is. So the power usage is really negligible, which is why Jayco chose to run that particular pump in their vans, and also another reason I chose to run the pump in the pump box as well. There you have it guys, that is my solution to endless water when we're off-grid caravanning and camping. Look, in all honesty, I probably wouldn't be using a filter like this twin canister filter. It's definitely overkill. It's large, it's bulky, and it's quite heavy when it's full of water, weighing in that 6 kilos. Something like this would be perfect, to be honest, depending on the water source obviously, but if it's a fairly clean water source, I'd be happy drinking something that came out of this. And with some clever packing inside this box, you can actually fit this inside the box, meaning that everything you need to get filtered clean water can all be packed inside this one box inside your setup. So we've got our 10 litres of water there, got it all packed up. We're seeing it doesn't draw much power. It's quite effective in the way that it sucks up the water, and overall I'm really happy. So in terms of cost, this particular box and everything that came with it, came in at just over $330, Australian dollars that is. And the filters here, you're looking at about 80 bucks for the inline filter, about another 80 bucks for the twin canister there as well. So again, depending on what kind of filtering you want would depend on how much this particular setup would cost, but overall it's pretty inexpensive considering it's got the water pump in there, all the electrical connections, the fuses, the water fittings and everything else that go with it. So like I said before, all the products that I use and to build this box are all in the description below if you want to buy them for yourself. Otherwise guys, I hope you found this video informative and helpful, and hopefully it motivates you guys to go out and build something like this for yourself. It's a nice, simple, easy half-day DIY job, and look, it's going to provide a lot of benefit to us and probably give the missus some decent showers in the caravan when we're off-grid camping as well, which is always a good thing. So thanks for watching guys, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.